This time, Mr. Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor William Edwards, here. Mayor Pro Tem Mark Baker. Present. Councilmember Catherine Rao.
Present.
Councilmember Carmelita Dunn.
Present.
Councilmember Helen Z. Willis.
Present.
Councilmember Naima Gilder. Councilmember Rosie Jackson will be absent. Councilmember Willis.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a forum.
Okay. Call the first item, please.
First item is a presentation by Christopher Pike, Economic Development Administrator, Destination South Fulton presentation.
Mr. Pike.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon.
Presentation will get up. There we go. Again, Christopher Pike here, Economic Development Administrator. Real quickly wanted to go through some information about our efforts around economic development. In some capacity or another, most of y'all have seen some of the information in this presentation, but I think it's important for us periodically to kind of see where we are from an economic development standpoint, and a lot of the projects that you all are working on, this will probably help kind of drive some of that dialogue and conversation as we move forward. And so I'll jump in real quickly so we don't take up too much time. I know we have some other presentations this afternoon. One of the main things that I really wanted to emphasize and that I keep talking about from an economic development standpoint is really having an economic development toolbox. And so when I say that currently there are things that we're not in a position to do from an economic development standpoint or participating in the economic development process, I'm really speaking to those mechanisms that help us really engage in a meaningful way if a developer comes to the city of South Fulton. And I'll give some examples as we move forward in the presentation to give you some indications of the type of projects and type of involvement that I'm talking about. But really, our ability to be able to develop the toolbox is really going to be essential as we move forward with a lot of these projects that we've been discussing. One of the things that we worked on is structurally, what does the organization look like? And so with the passage of the budget, as you all know, we developed the office of, or the organization called Destination South Fulton. As I tell people all the time, I really look at Destination South Fulton just like any other economic development organization. Some that you all are familiar with is like Invest Atlanta, which is the economic development arm of the city of Atlanta, or Select Fulton, which is the economic development entity for the county. And so Destination South Fulton is nothing more than just the economic development arm of the city of South Fulton. Some of the things that came out of the passage of the budget that we're really excited about is our small business incubator and resource center. We've made some strides in really moving that project forward. And so as we develop that more, we'll be talking more about it. But really, it's really investing in our small businesses and understanding the important role that they play as we move our economic development initiatives forward in the city of South Fulton. I tend to think, and pretty much everybody who's in economic development tends to think that small business, mom and pop businesses are the backbone of any community. So our ability to be able to grow that, our ability to be able to invest in that will pay off in big dividends as we move forward. And so that initiative is something that will really help us as we develop this economic development toolbox. Another thing that I think is really has a lot of foresight from the council standpoint is the small business sustainability grants. Again, that's investing in small business. I tell people when I talk about the small business sustainability grants, I look at it like the mom and pop bakery. And so obviously mom and pop bakeries are competing with Publix, who has the ability, as we all like when we do these birthday cakes, to put our babies' pictures on the cake, and so they print out that thing where you can eat the picture. And so there's special equipment that does that. And so a small mom and pop bakery will be able to apply for a grant to actually buy the equipment to be able to do those things. So that makes them competitive with a lot of our bigger bakeries. And so that's just an example of one way that you could utilize a small business development grant to really help diversify your offerings so that you can create a sustainable business environment. One thing that we will be looking at and have more discussions on in the future are tax allocation districts. We're very excited about the opportunity to use that as a mechanism to help spur investment in specific areas in our city. This will be a way for us to have a very significant investment or very significant participation with a developer as we see that a project or there are things that really need some assistance. For example, to give you a big example, which just passed recently, the Gulch project, a lot of that public funding is from tax allocation district, the West Side TAD in Atlanta. So that's an example of a project that was help funded using tax allocation district funding. And so we look to be able to do similar type of investment here in the city of South Fulton around that. One project that I'm excited about, and we just got the notice today, the election had been certified, so Freeport tax exemption passed last week, all 4 parts, which is very exciting because that makes us very competitive to our neighboring cities when it is for attraction of certain types of business and industry. So our citizens supported that over 60%, so that's something that that's an item that we can put in our economic development toolbox that will allow us to attract specific types of businesses to our community. And so it's just our way of making sure that we're competitive and that we can go out there and offer the incentives to really bring not just jobs, but quality jobs to the community. As some council people have said before, and it's well known, you know, we're not trying to recruit jobs that keep people at minimum wage or just at the bare minimum. We're trying to create wealth and sustainable growth, and so this will allow us to do that. One thing that we'd like to look at doing that I think is important as we move forward and start looking at how do we develop, again, opportunities to participate in the private sector is the opportunity for a development authority. So to give you some examples of why you would need a development authority, why you look at, for example, I mentioned earlier, the Gulch deal. In principle, in theory, the Atlanta City Council voted on that deal, but what was less publicized is a day or two later, Invest Atlanta had a meeting and they actually approved the Gulch deal because the incentives actually go through the development authority and not the city. And so anytime you have any of those developments, you're going to need a mechanism to be able to participate. Because of the gratuities law, it's illegal for municipalities to give private sector money directly, so you usually partner with an authority to do that. I will say most of the developments that you are probably familiar with, while they don't mention development authority, there's a development authority involved with it. So for example, if you look at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the city of Atlanta didn't cut Arthur Blank a $750 million check. If you look, the Georgia World Congress Center Authority actually owns the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Same thing with State Farm Arena, that's actually owned by the Atlanta Fulton County Recreation Authority. So you need these mechanisms to really participate in the private sector. And so we will be, Friday, most of you all will be participating in economic development strategic training at Georgia Power. We've actually invited Dan McCray to come talk about development authorities and downtown development authorities, so he will dive really deep into that. So this will be a great opportunity to ask questions about how those mechanisms work and as it relates to participating in deal structuring and those things. So we just want to make sure that we're developing those things as we move forward. One of the things, really the biggest thing I heard my first week here was about workforce development. Since we've actually done this slide, we've actually met with Atlanta Technical College. We're very excited that they are interested in working with us in a very significant way to bring workforce development and training locally to the city of South Fulton. And so as we move forward, we'll develop that more. But that, as I say, is a response mechanism to what the private sector has come and approached us about. I hear on a weekly basis about the need for training workforce here, especially in more of our industrial areas. And that's something that if we want to be able to retain businesses that are already here and attract new businesses, we're going to have to address this in a meaningful way. And so this is really a priority for us from an economic development standpoint, because if we can build and bring business here all day, but if they can't actually make the products that they built the company here to do, or they can't manufacture or keep their doors open, it doesn't really do us any good to recruit them. So we not only need to recruit them, but make sure they have the resources when they get here to be able to be successful. And the other thing that is going to be vitally important for us as we move forward as a municipality is understanding what we want our city to look like, not only today, but 10, 15, 20 years from now. And so the most important thing that we can do as staff and as elected officials is really have a strategic plan as it relates to economic development. And so, as I tell people, this will be an opportunity for us not only to have citizen input, but also corporate input from the business sector as well to determine what that plan looks like. And I think it's even more beneficial in helping us be more business friendly, because what it will do is if somebody says, hey, I want to bring this type of development to the city of South Fulton, they'll be able to look at this plan and say, okay, the citizens have given input and they support this, but they're not going to support that. So then it helps us go ahead and weed out a lot of the things that we know that the citizens don't want. And so the developers have a clear plan and vision for what the city is going to be, and the citizens have a clear plan and vision for what the city is going to be. And I think it would just help us really attract more of the type of stuff that we want because we have this plan. I'm going to move really quickly into the second part, about 5 minutes on this, and then I'll answer any questions that you have. I think that's important as we move forward to really develop our economic development narrative and what that means when we're talking to people about the city of South Fulton. And I like to give these presentations quarterly, just a refresher, because I think our citizens can be an economic development multiplying force. So they can say, oh, no, I know that these are true because I've heard them or I've seen them. And so our ability to make this information readily available to the community, I think, is just as important. Because the reality is sometimes site selectors come to our city and they're talking to our citizens, they're not even talking to us. So we need to make sure that they're armed with the right information so that if somebody asks them a question, maybe not this far in the weeds, but they understand what economic development is in the city of South Fulton. So real quickly, most of this stuff you all already know, but I think it's important so when I'm talking to people, you understand what I'm showing them or talking to them about. And so, you know, basically, we're 85 square miles, which I think is outrageously large, but you know, it is what it is at this point. But it makes it very interesting to manage, but it's something that people are always blown away by when they come and talk to us about the city size. Another thing that is very interesting is we've grown a tremendous amount over the last 18 years. So for example, and so just to give some perspective on these numbers, so these numbers, we worked with Georgia Power to extract this information from an ESRI report. They use a file called a shape file where they can pull this information, and so we can get it from the unincorporated part of what was Fulton County. So that's how we have this information specific to the 85 square miles that make up the city of South Fulton. So while obviously the city wasn't chartered in 2000, the land area that is currently the city, this is the demographics from that information. So in 2000, 44,000 people. Today we're right at 98. 2023 will be at 106. So a lot of growth. I think one thing that's also telling is you'll look at a lot of the economic development numbers from when the recession hit, and it'll give you an indication of some of the income in the city of South Fulton. Just for clarity's sake, we're the 8th largest city in the state of Georgia, 4th non-consolidated city in the state of Georgia, and we're the 3rd largest municipality in Metro Atlanta. So those are some speaking points for you, that you use as you're going around speaking and talking to people in the community. we obviously already knew that we skewed very young compared to the rest of the state and the country. So in the rest of the slides, the blue is the city of South Fulton, the orange is Georgia, and the gray is the country. So we skew very young, which is something that when we're doing our economic development strategic plan, we'll probably hear a lot of some of the things that folks want to see in the community that will be directly related to that demographic. Households, so the number of households, as you can see, we've grown pretty significantly. Right now we're at about 35,000 households in the city. Home ownership, which I think is the biggest indicator of our economic stability. So if you look in 2000, our home ownership was right at about 68. Obviously, in the heat of the recession, we dropped down to about 64. But if you look where the city of South Fulton is compared to the state and the country, you can see that we rebounded much faster and quicker than the rest of the country, and we didn't get hit as hard as other cities and municipalities in the state and in the country. And so I think that's an indication that our citizens tend to be more responsible fiscally, but it also speaks to the wealth and income of a lot of our citizens. And so I think that's a good indicator for us, especially when we're talking to some of these retailers that don't think that our demographics warrant their business in our city. Median household value, again, we beat the state average. The gray, when you take into New York and California and some of those places that have very high real estate, obviously that number is going to be skewed a little bit, but I think we fare very well, especially with the state as you look at some of the other municipalities that are in our area. Household income, again, we beat the state and the national average in median household income, and that's going to stay pretty strong as we move forward into the future. Average household income, again, beating the state average, a little bit below the national average. Per capita income, again, we're competitive with the state, a little bit behind the country. But I think one of the things to really look at when we look at these numbers and our investment in really small mom and pop businesses, we can really start having an impact on those numbers by spurring more entrepreneurship and more wealth generation. So I think we're in the right direction when we're talking about small business incubators, small business sustainability grants. I think we can really start impacting this number a lot as we move forward with some of these programs. Another key indicator, educational attainment, very strong in high school plus, and then bachelor's plus, beating both the state and the national average. So again, I think that helps dispel a lot of myths that people have about folks south of I-20, something that I think is important for us to really hone in on and spread that word about educational attainment in our area. And then this map shows a regional comparison, so how we compare to all of our counterparts. So just for those who can't see, the blue is City of South Fulton, the orange is East Point, the gray is Fairburn, yellow is Union City, blue is College Park, green is Hapeville, and the beige mauve color is Atlanta. And so population, obviously, we're the largest in the area compared to Atlanta. But median household income, we actually beat Atlanta and all the other area cities in median household income. Then, of course, per capita income, we drop below Atlanta, but I think that's because you have a lot of millennials with good jobs that live in Midtown and stuff like that. So that probably is why that number is skewed a little bit like that. And then the last portion is tapestry segments. This really talks about, so tapestry is a professional industry designation. So when you see some of these, I didn't make these terms up, these were made up and for the purpose of understanding how people spend funds, what type of spending habits they have, those type of things. And so we're going to just go through the top 3 tapestry segments for the city of South Fulton. And I think if you look at these, it looks like any town in America, so there's nothing really that sticks out from the information. So our number 1 tapestry segment is up-and-coming families. That would definitely go into the fact that we're skewed very young demographic-wise. But if you look at the median household income, it's $72,000. So that's pretty strong, and that's our #1 segment in the city of South Fulton. Our second largest tapestry segment is family foundation. So those tend to be older generation folks, more mature families, but a lower income compared to the other segments. And then our last segment, soccer moms. Again, I didn't make these up, but tend to be more of your average American family, 90,000 median household income. So this is our third largest segment of citizens in our community. And with that, I'll answer any easy questions.
Thank you so much. We have time for questions. Realize that we have 4 more minutes.
Okay, that's fine.
Ms. Willis. And we have Rob.
Thank you. That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
What do you think we can probably gather some more of this in a summary or marketing type information format? Because what I'm thinking about is now that we are coding businesses, we need to be able to give them something in their hands and something professional looking, something.
Correct. We are currently right now working on collateral material, basically, so things that you can give someone as you're out making presentations, because obviously that's something you want to be able to leave behind. Very similar to some of the stuff when we went on our town center tour, some of the stuff that we got. So we're currently working on that right now as we speak.
Okay, and also because I know it will be successful, when the referendum for the tax are approved, you and I talked about the DMO, which is going to help market our city. Is there any way that you can do a presentation on that? I talked with the attorney about working on some legislation for that when the time is in when that time is appropriate, because I want to make sure that we have the appropriate people on that board if we decide to keep it internal in our city.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, that's Ms. Rob.
This is a question or something I'd like us to look at. I know you talked about the per capita being kind of a significant gap between that and what we see as the median household income. And I think you kind of attributed it to millennials who may be living in Atlanta. I'd like us to explore that because I have a notion that it might also be related to the fact that we have a lot of retirees who have high retirement income.
Right.
And if you look at our data, we also have some data that says, we have a segment of the population who own their homes outright. So I really wonder what that might be attributable to. And I just think that's something we should look at because we do have a senior population who falls into that category. Retired educators and executives, and they may be with higher retirement and coming up. That might be what it's reflective of.
Okay.
All right, so
Thank you.
no, we have one
Oh, you got
comment
I'm sorry.
from Mr. Reed.
Yes, actually, piggybacking off of Councilwoman Rowell, I also think that another reason our per capita income drops is because Atlanta closed all of their public housing and gave Section 8 vouchers. And the way vouchers work is the rent is whatever it is, and if you can't make up the difference between the rent and what you're given on a voucher, you have to move somewhere else. We know there's been a huge influx of people into Cobb County, Clayton County, and Fulton County. The other thing that I am concerned about is the above average median income and the below the mark per capita income, to me, point to a great income inequality in our city. I know I was looking at these home prices. I know that there's no house in my area that is $170,000 or anything close to. No, houses just aren't selling for that. And so while I think that this is wonderful for marketing, and I definitely think that we should market our city that way, I think that as policymakers, when we're making policies, whether it's fines and fees, or whether it is services like parks and recreation, that we make sure that we are conscious of the income inequality in our city and that we budget for that.
Well, I want to clarify something. So I don't want us to use, you can't use median numbers and per capita numbers interchangeably.
Right.
So your median income is exact middle. And so 50% of your population makes more than that, 50% of your population makes less than that. Per capita is the average of all the reported incomes divided by your population of people 15 and above. So, I tell people, you know, it's kind of like median income is when you kind of throw out the highest and the lowest grade, and then you just keep everything in between, and then your per capita is just the average of everything. So we just want to be careful when we're talking about those, that we don't combine them, because they mean two different things.
Right, no, I agree. And so if, for example, our mayor and council, we all make 13, the mayor makes 27, right, or 23. Our median and our per capita would be about the same. But if one person moved into our city of 8, I'm just going to pick on you, Mr. City Manager. If Mr. Donald moved in with that 195 salary, our median becomes the difference between, the median between 13 and 195, which is 104. And that doesn't reflect what anybody up here is making. It, you know, a few people at the top can pull that median number way up. And so, again, for marketing, I think that we should use that median number, but I think that when we're making policies for our citizens, you just have to be aware of that per capita number, and that 72 may not be representative of large portions of our population, but there might actually just be a few people at the top that are pulling that number way up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Khalil.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bell.
All right.
Mr. Clerk, Mrs. Willis has agreed to bring her 2 topics on last, and I would like to bring up the municipal court now. The municipal court. Mr. Clerk? Aerotropolis, did you ask?
Yeah, I did, so I put up the municipal court, so you're ready for
We'll
Aerotropolis?
go ahead and do Aerotropolis.
Okay.
And then we'll do this.
That's what we need. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Glad to be here. My name is Stan Reecy. I'm presenting on behalf of the Atlanta Aerotropolis Community Improvement Districts. You're probably more familiar with Mr. Gerald McDowell, our Executive Director, but I was fortunate enough to recently receive a promotion. So Gerald said to me, "Young man, you're going to earn your paycheck today." He didn't actually say that. I'm sort of reading between the lines a little bit. Anyhow, today I'd like to present to you on the proposed enhancements that the CID will be undertaking, or is hoping to be undertaking, for the Buffington Road corridor. So I'm going to go through with you what it is that this project is. We're really kind of talking about 2 different projects here. It's based around the GDOT project, but then we are proposing to sort of strike while the iron's hot and create some additional improvements on top of that. So I'm going to thoroughly walk through the history of our discussions with local partners, get some background on what GDOT is proposing to do, and then talk about our next steps going forward. And I'll try to keep this relatively brief. So on this slide you see, this is some budget information for the actual project that, again, Georgia Department of Transportation is undertaking for Buffington. It's actually 2 different projects from Rock Quarry Road up to Roosevelt Highway, US 29, and then also from Rock Quarry Road south to Royal South Parkway. So this entire corridor, which kind of centers around the Chick-fil-A headquarters and crosses over the South Fulton Parkway, really touches 3 different cities. It touches a lot of South Fulton, but it also touches on Union City and the city of College Park. And so this project was programmed into GDOT's budget, and it's a pretty substantial widening project. It's currently a 2-lane road, if you're probably familiar. And what they're proposing to do is they're widening that from 2 to 3 lanes in some portions and 2 to 4 lanes in others. So there's $2.2 million worth of engineering, $20 million worth of right-of-way, and then a $17 million construction bill for, if you do some quick arithmetic, that's a $40 million project. So this is a very substantial investment that GDOT is making. And this is not a state highway. GDOT is investing this money in this corridor, and they are handing it back to the local jurisdictions. So the schedule on this project, they're going to be wrapping up the engineering late in really this year and early next, and then they'll be doing right-of-way acquisition for a couple of years. Should start construction around September of 2020, and then that'll be a 2-year construction time. It'll open to traffic in about 2022, should be early 2022. So you have an understanding of what the state is proposing to do on this corridor. This gives a view of that entire segment. It's almost stretches all the way south to Interstate 85. The north direction is to the right of this image. So you see it's from, again, Royal South Parkway all the way up to Roosevelt Highway. And what this is currently, as you're familiar, again, there's a 2-lane, rural roadway configuration. For the portion of the road from Rock Quarry down to Royal South, which is kind of shared between Union City and City of South Fulton, the roadway will be taken up to a 3-lane section. It's got a 2-way center left turn lane. And then this rendering actually shows a sidewalk on either side. I'll speak more in a moment about some enhancements that the CID was able to communicate with GDOT to get installed that are a little different from what you see there for those 5-foot sidewalks. But anyhow, the northern portion of the road between Rock Quarry and Roosevelt Highway is what you see here. This 4-lane configuration. It's got a raised median, and this is actually what it's going to look like going over the bridge over South Fulton Parkway as well. So this is, again, a very robust enhancement that the state is doing. And then to give you a little more context on the very complicated city limits, I put this very amateur map together that shows basically Union City kind of bordering South Fulton. Union City is kind of those orange lines. South Fulton is blue. And what makes this really interesting is that there are portions along South Fulton Parkway or Buffington Road where the city boundary is the road itself. So we've had to really get a little bit creative in getting everyone together to discuss how any costs might be shared for enhancements on this project. So this is that southernmost portion, kind of leading up to Rock Quarry Road, continuing along the quarry there in Union City up to Rock Quarry Road is shown there, and then it kind of intersects with a portion of College Park. On the lower right-hand side, you can see the Coca-Cola bottling distribution facility. Kind of gives you an idea of your bearings there. And then kind of, this is continuing northwards, essentially, along Buffington. And then here you see, this is kind of centered around Chick-fil-A. And then, of course, you see the interchange with South Fulton Parkway. There's Mannheim Automotive there in the lower right. And then there's that sort of stub of South Fulton that goes in to the sort of Buffington Center area, I think, right there. We've got a better map of this now, fortunately, that actual professional map making folks put together, so I can share that with you at your request. So this project, as I mentioned, is a state project. The actual widening, everything that I've described up to this point. This investment is about, now $46 million roughly investment would be occurring regardless of any action the CID takes, regardless of what the cities would be doing. So everything that I've described, that widening will already occur. What the CID, what Aerotropolis has reached out to its local partners about is what I'm going to talk about kind of in the second part of this presentation, to do some additional enhancements to really capitalize on this and make this kind of a marquee corridor for all three of the cities that this road runs through. So I'll start with giving you kind of a timeline of the project enhancements that we've done, discussions about project enhancements we've done up to this point. Starting really in the fourth quarter of last year, we came together with GDOT, Chick-fil-A, and the city partners to discuss things we could do for landscaping and lighting enhancements along Buffington Road, above and beyond what GDOT is going to do. GDOT's widening project is not going to involve lighting. It doesn't meet the threshold for the installation of lighting. And as far as landscaping, there would be pretty much just a resodding of what's already there, so it would just be kind of a standard project. You know, GDOT's in the business of moving cars through, and that's what this would do. But we saw an opportunity from our master plan to do something a little more interesting with this. So GDOT agreed that they would be willing to work with us to design in some landscaping and enhancements and things like that, provided, of course, that we find money to come up for those sorts of things. Another component that we worked with GDOT on to get designed into this project was a multi-use path. So I mentioned earlier that that concept showed those 2 5-foot sidewalks. Well, we actually have recently completed our greenways and trail plan, and the Buffington Road corridor was one of the corridors that we wanted to see a greenway installed in. So this looked like a good potential early win for this project, and we figured, you know, if somebody else started spending money on engineering this, why don't we ask them to do it? And so they were gracious enough to actually do that. And so they combined essentially taking 5-foot path on either side and then consolidated it into a 10-foot path on one side. And it kind of crosses over either side due to right-of-way issues that we have. But there's a continuous, 10-foot pedestrian path, which is a lot more separated from road traffic and will be a much better amenity for folks. We talked to Chick-fil-A about doing aesthetic improvements to the bridge, because again, this would just be your standard concrete bridge with a chain link fence on it, and we think that there could be a much more interesting gateway that kind of announces that you're in this area. So Chick-fil-A actually worked with their consultant on designing an aesthetic treatment for that. And GDOT also is looking at installing additional turn access at Rockport Road, implementing a roundabout. And then so we've had these discussions over the course of the year to kind of talk about all the preferences on the part of the city staffs, speaking for elected officials of various different organizations that we're working with, and kind of culminated in just last month we had a so-called mayor's meeting to give an update on where we're at as we're getting to kind of the final minutes, so to speak, of this, and we are looking at moving forward with this. GDOT's looking for a commitment in a way before they begin to designing this in. So the actual proposed enhancements that we are looking at the cities to help shoulder the cost of would be two things. These would be aesthetic treatments along the roadway corridor and at the interchange, and those would be things like decorative plantings, upgrades to the crosswalks, and concrete pads for any kind of signage or wayfinding. And this is actually very consistent. We had the CID spent our task order dollars with our consultant to have them design these concepts in a very somewhat similar manner to what we had with the Virgin Diamond interchange at Camp Creek that's now currently under construction, if you're familiar with that effort. And then we also looked at lighting options. As I mentioned earlier, we wanted this to be increased access for pedestrians, and lighting is necessary for safety in after dark hours. And so we actually had two options that were explored for normal kind of street lighting like you would see, and then also pedestrian level lighting, which would be about waist height, that would only be along that shared path. And so lest anyone think that we aren't actually invested in this project, this is kind of a list of all of the CID contributions to the Buffington Road corridor. We do almost $20,000 a year of weekly landscape maintenance, and actually over $20,000 if you count the weed control at the interchange with South Fulton Parkway. There was a guardrail painting project that we did, I believe that was back in 2016, to replace the paint on a damaged guardrail. There's also a runaround project which helped install essentially a passing lane to alleviate some traffic that was going on there near Chick-fil-A. And then we also did a traffic study, and then as part of this effort, $45,000 in landscape design. So we have spent to date on this project, since this corridor came into the CID, almost $100,000. So we are invested and investing in this as well going forward. So we are proposing an overall cost sharing scheme with our local partners and with Chick-fil-A, based on conversations again that we've had with staff from each, and then leading up to again that October meeting. And we've kind of refined it continuously. So the thing to really take away from this up here is that GDOT is, we have several different figures, they are estimates, but you know, GDOT is spending over $40 million on this project. And so for essentially a little bit extra, we are looking at cities of College Park, South Fulton, and Union City, in combination with Fulton County and Chick-fil-A, to provide some additional funding to make this a vast improvement over what's been, you know, what the current condition is there. So to give an idea of how we got at this, and I won't go too much into these details, but to give a ballpark, in order, you know, not to come up here and ask a city to be blindly committing to a type of improvement without any idea of what it might cost, we basically divided just the length of the project, and this was after discussion with staffs from each of the cities. We divided the length of the improvements for both lighting and landscape that would go in for each city, basically portion that up in just the linear footage, and then that comes out to, you know, various costs based on where in that city each of these are. So the total, when you add it all up for each of the three local partners, well, and Chick-fil-A, but for the municipal partners, when you add it up for South Fulton, you would be looking at something in the realm of, you know, somewhere between $475,000 to $375,000. That's a range based on the street light option versus the slightly less expensive pedestrian lighting option. Now, bear in mind, of course, this is an estimate, but as I mentioned, we wanted to have something to go on in terms of what this cost might look like. You know, otherwise, we would just be coming up here asking for, you know, interest in sort of abstract project. So the benefit, I think it's important to point out the benefit of these investments on top of the, you know, $46 million that GDOT's going to spend. There'll be about $3.3 million in additional enhancements between all the local partners in Chick-fil-A. That's going to create 334 jobs, and it's going to create strong areas of return in terms of economic impact, in terms of mobility, both vehicular and pedestrian. It's going to be an improvement in safety, particularly has potential for, you know, transit users and pedestrians in that regard. And it's also a boon to public health in the area. So this is really a win-win-win. So what needs to happen going forward? Sort of the crux of why I'm up here. GDOT is locking in their designs for this project. They're getting to a phase where they need to have commitments in order to design in some of the additional elements, such as lighting, such as the provision for the landscaping. So before they get to what they call preliminary field plan review, they would like to have commitments in order so they're not spending extra money to design in things that aren't going to actually be built. So that is actually supposed to occur at the end of this month, and hence why I'm up here right now at this council meeting. So spoiler alert for the presentation that will be occurring, the letter of commitment, later on this afternoon. That that's going to be kind of the first component of that. The project is going to go through, again, that preliminary plan review, and then GDOT is actually asking for a check for this project from the project partners 7 weeks prior to the start of construction, or when it's let to construction. So that would be September of 2020. And so it's, you know, fortuitous that we're able to talk about this now and talk about funding priorities before that budgeting process occurs. It wouldn't do us any good to have that discussion as the budget has already been created. So we've worked with City Manager Cody Donald, and he has, you know, been very helpful in walking through that process. The letter of commitment that we will be presenting does not commit the City of South Fulton to a particular figure. All of those numbers that I showed in terms of enhancements were just to give you an idea of what you would be budgeting for, and that process is going to continue as this project continues to be designed, as we continue to get updates on what those costs will be. So we don't want to have anyone essentially thinking that we're asking for a very finite amount right now. But we are asking for a commitment in spirit to the landscaping and lighting as a commitment to GDOT essentially, or to show that we are, you know, as a group serious about delivering this. So, and this was discussed at last month's mayor's meeting, but the questions that we kind of went through in that were, and we asked this of each of the three cities, again, Union City, College Park, and South Fulton. In this case, you know, is South Fulton interested in continuing to pursue these enhancements? Is it something that, you know, the elected officials and the residents of the city would desire? Is there agreement about how those costs were proposed to be divided and the estimate based on that? Is there a preference for that lower level pedestrian lighting or the more standard kind of Cadillac version street lighting? And is it possible for the city to commit to budgeting as that process moves forward into the future? And so with that, I will turn it over to y'all, and any other questions related to what I presented?
Yeah.
By all means.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a few questions. I know Councilman Rao comes after anybody else.
Mayor, quickly, can I provide a couple of insights that they may not have covered that may also be helpful?
Very briefly, go ahead.
I think that the one item is Councilmember Jackson was also in attendance at this mayor's meeting, and she included in your packets a letter of support. She was briefed on it as well. We've been working on this, maybe about 2 months or so now with the Aerotropolis team, and so we believe that this $475,000 or thereabouts is a fair and reasonable number, and the reason why we have supported and have advised the council that this is an amicable and productive project for the city is that, one, our fiscal position in FY 2021, although they'd be asking for those funds in FY 20 at the time that they would be delivered for all of the South Fulton cities, we clarified during the meeting, we deliver in 2021, meaning that as you approve the 2020 budget process, we would be able to deliver those funds. As you know, we are projected to be completely out of the red during that time with our tax base growing, et cetera, et cetera. So we're very confident that we would be able to have the funding available, and we believe that this is a worthwhile project.
Thank you, City Manager. I didn't make the meeting. That's why I said Mr. Donald had a previous engagement, but had I been there, there's a couple of things I think I would have asked. All right. Anytime you tell me that you're doing a standable project, that scares me up front. When I look at the work that's being done on places like Fulton Industrial Boulevard, that's above standard in my mind. So that kind of nerved me when you said that. What is the increase in trips based on what you're doing?
The increase in vehicular traffic.
Trips, yes.
I could not tell you off the top of my head.
I think that's a very important question to be asked, Mr. Downing.
I can work with the project manager.
If you have an increase in trips, people might find alternative ways to get off Buffington Road. So before I could say it, I need to know that's technical information that I think we all need to know here. The other thing is, you didn't really mention, there was nothing mentioned, Mr. Donald, about the Buffington Road exit. And that is a common place for stacking.
Yes.
And so I need to know, in this study, how would this study affect the stacking of Buffington Road? I mean, it's just something you can come back and tell me if you don't know the answer. But there's a major problem on Buffington. The other thing is, you did say you had a traffic study, right?
Sorry.
So that would have told you how many trips we had.
So GDOT, as part of their process for development projects, will look at those numbers and then, based on their projected traffic for 2040 for this project, would engineer it such that it is going to deliver that reduction.
I think you said to me that you split it up based on area.
Right.
I think another way that possibly could have done it is because your area, my area, may not have as big a tax base as a College Park area. So I'm just putting these out there, Mr. Dunn. You may not have a bigger tax base as someone who has Manheim, Coca-Cola, and all those things. And to split it up based on parcels as it is, I think maybe you need to go back and look at that.
Well, so Mayor, I think the reason they did it in that way is because the actual maintenance of the improvements, it falls on the various cities. And so that happens regardless, but once we take over transportation, we'd be the last city that would be taking over our own maintenance. And so as some of these questions that you're asking did come up during the meeting. I asked for a couple of them. And so when we looked at the methodology, I think that's why we were confident that it made sense. I'd also tell you one of the things that we offer to the other cities, because they are not certain that they have the manpower to be able to operate and maintain, is that for a nominal fee, the city of South Fulton would be interested in maintaining on their behalf, if they paid for the service. So we talked about the methodology, we talked about maintenance, we also talked about a couple of nuances in the project, including a sidewalk ask that is from Fulton County, for which they would incur the cost. So we did include many of these questions and topics into the conversation, and some of those things are included in Councilmember Jackson's letter, but we wanted to make sure that he had an abbreviated presentation.
I'm just saying that some of these questions I'm asking
Understood.
should be a part of this presentation, because to make it come out seem like it's better sense. The other thing is not knowing what the increase in trips are going to be. Would that call for I want to use the word dumping, an increased traffic towards the 29 area? I'm going to tell you why I'm going to ask you. Because if there's an increased traffic that dumps off into 29, which is a state highway, 29 in Campbell Road does not meet. So what you have is a light at Buffington, and you take a right just a few feet from there, there's a light, there's a street that's called Campbell Drive. And for many, many years, we have tried to align those two streets. I think it's very important that we kind of look at the alignment of those two streets, because if you and this is your district, and if you look at those trucks coming down farther and developing to another state highway, which is 29, because of the fact that you're widening and doing other things allows them to come down a little further. I just think someone needs to take some consideration to the alignment of Campbell Drive and Buffington Highway. That's just a suggestion. It may not be able to be working. And lastly, let me say this. most, and I guess I might not answer this, but most CID projects are funded by the additional meals which the CID businesses agree to pay. What makes this different?
I would say the scope of this project is somewhat greater than, I guess, our usual. I don't want to get too ahead of my skis.
Get your skis on, come on in.
But,
Take that one.
You take the one.
let the big man talk about that.
All right.
Two quick comments. Your traffic question, what we're presenting tonight for the cities to share in has to do with the enhancements of GDOT project. So all your questions are more for the GDOT project that they've already programmed, not for the enhancements that we are asking our cities to participate in. So that's number one. Number two, if you look at other CIDs, the contributions that CIDs make are usually on the front end. It has to do with the design of the project and the preliminary engineering component of the project. The actual payment or contribution for construction comes from other sources. So the CIDs, if we hadn't gone out and done the study, we wouldn't be before you tonight with these enhancements and bring you together. So if you go, for example, if you look at Georgia 400, that almost $1 billion project that you have over there, the contribution that the perimeter CIDs made for that project 5 or 7 years ago had to do with the conceptual and the design phase of that project, not the actual construction of the project.
So you don't understand.
So we're following the same pattern that other CIDs follow. Is our role is to come in and before you spend your money, is to see if it's even feasible to do it.
I follow you. And Mr. Manager, where I understand what he's saying, maybe my questions, the opportunity for my questions should be posed to the
GDOT project.
the DOT. All right, thank you for making it clear. Ms. Ross?
He pointed out what I was about to, that in the itemized enhancement, it talks about our contribution being for landscaping and lighting, whether we choose the street light or the pedestrian option. And I think this is the right kind of project based on what we've heard from residents across the city in terms of how they want us to improve the aesthetics of our city. Are we going to be taking action on this at the work session, city manager, or is there something we need to take up at a regular, at our 7 o'clock?
It's a part of the 7 o'clock meeting. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Baker?
Almost completely different from Councilwoman Rao when it comes to this. And some of my questions were aligned with the mayor as well, but I still, at the same time, wanted to know, why we were so much more than some of the other cities. And then there's no commitment to the Old National area, which is one of our largest corridors. And we're about to write a check for almost $500,000, and that's a problem with me. That's it.
Mr. Baker, I want to say something about that. And Mr. Manager, since the inception, Mr. Baker, of the CID, have always been puzzling to me why the area of CID jumped over Old National and went to places like Buffington Road, where you have Chick-fil-A. That might be the answer to my question. Where you have Chick-fil-A and other places. So I just want, he knows I've always put that out there. And so I think your question makes sense, but this is what we have now. And I understand the aesthetic value that we're talking about.
Well, and I think this project is associated with an existing GDOT project, so this is just an additional enhancement. It's not a cherry pick or anything of that nature. It is associated with a funded GDOT project where the enhancement is to take advantage of those resources that are being poured into the area, and then we will build on top of that.
That's correct. And just to address the concern regarding Old National, so when the CIDs were, and this is the Fulton County CID, when it was in formation, it is you have to get the consent of property owners. And so from 285 and Old National up to the Godby Road, we were able to get property owners to agree in that section on Old National to be part of the CID. Beyond Godby Road, we did not get an overwhelming response from those property owners along Old National. We do have an expansion effort underway, so in 2019, we will be going back out to property owners, and for those who would like to become a part of the CID, that opportunity will be made available to them. And so we are hoping that the success, or I should say our track record over the last 4 or 5 years can demonstrate to those property owners beyond Godby Road the value to be part of the CID. And I believe your incorporation as a city brings value to that corridor as well, and demonstrating to those property owners that now it's not just the CID, and previously where you had Fulton County, who may not adequately invested in that corridor as we would like to have seen. Now we have a city that is willing and ready to do so. Now those property owners may be more willing to join the CID. So we're going to be reaching out to them.
All right, well, thank you so much. Mr. Cleveland, we'll close it out here.
Yeah, I had a meeting with some Aerotropolis folks about a project on National, which is not in Aerotropolis, but this same funding rubric question came up, and I suggested that perhaps our contributions to Aerotropolis should be commensurate with the amount of Aerotropolis that is in our city. So if 3% is in our city, then we should put 3% in. And I think that encourages both sides to work to make sure that more of it is in our city. But I actually had a question about funding, and about design. We got a presentation. It seems like almost every meeting, someone from Aerotropolis is here. They're building stuff. Asking for money. That's great. But you guys have from what I've seen, you have a very solid sense of design for things, and we haven't done that yet. And so I feel like in some ways these lighting and my question is how much input do we have once we pick the option? How much input do we have on the design? Because with all of these Aerotropolis projects going ahead of everyone else, it seems like you guys are going to design the palette for our entire region, these projects. So that's my first question.
So for the design phase of all the projects, the actual concepts, they come from our stakeholders, not from within. They come, so we have stakeholder meetings,
right? And
so along with the consultants and the stakeholders, that's where the concepts, that's how they originate. So this is not an internal process for the CIDs to come up with a concept and then present it out. It's actually a joint effort between our consultants and our stakeholders. Our role, if I may, our role is simply, as the city manager indicated, is to keep our eyes open for opportunities like this, so that when GDOT or the Atlanta Regional Commission or any other agency, when they program projects, then we are able to get involved with that project that's been programmed, do the upfront work without our cities having to make any kind of investment or commitments, and determine if it's feasible to move forward with a project. And so at this point, like for example, with what we're presenting to you tonight, if the cities decide not to participate, the GDOT project is going to be built. We just have an opportunity to enhance what they're going to do, and it was at our expense to bring this to you. And so if you say, no, we want to pass on this opportunity, it didn't cost you anything to make that decision. That's our role, is to make that investment from our property owners. But in making that investment, we brought your staffs together to say, okay, if you would participate, what are the components, what are the concepts, what are the designs that you would like to see? and then which ones would you be willing to fund? So that's the process that we would go through. We're not designing in-house, we're designing in partnership with our stakeholders.
Thank you for that. I think it's just something that we just have to keep in mind, because quite a few gateways of our city, Old National, Buffington Road, Camp Creek, they're getting these aesthetic overhauls, and so I think that's just kind of going to set the tone. These numbers are hard numbers for these enhancement costs.
Are they hard numbers? No, they're preliminary estimates.
They're estimates, and then so for example, there's like a $230,000 difference between the street lighting and the pedestrian lighting option. So like, do we say yes and that gets worked out later? I just want to understand, what are we committing ourselves to tonight?
Go back to what the mayor alluded to earlier. You have it's based on standard. What is it that you want to see? You want to see a basic light installed, or do you want to raise the standard? And there's a cost associated with a basic light versus a higher design light. Okay. And so that's your choice.
Okay, so we do get to choose it. So
yes,
our guess isn't like a blank check. And like
correct.
Like, oh, you said.
Yeah. All you're indicating when you move on this action, all you're indicating to GDOT is that you're interested in the project. You would like to see it move to the next steps. You're not making that financial commitment tonight when you move on that action.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take Ms. Willis and then Ms. Rao. We go to the next item.
Yes, I would like to ask my colleagues to encourage my colleagues to support this project. Although it may not be in substantially in the Old National area, this does benefit the overall city. And so there are going to be projects that are going to be done in some areas that are not in District 3 or 5. But if it benefits the overall city, then I will be supportive of it. And so majority of this project is in District 5. Some of it does lead to District 3. And I agree with the mayor, we do need to look at some improvements for Highway 29. But I would be inclined to say I would ask my colleagues to please be supportive of this project.
You have anything to add?
Yes, one thing I did want to bring to everybody's attention, and I don't know the status, but hopefully somebody will look at it. I know Fulton County Commissioner Bob Ellis introduced some legislation that would not allow county money to be put into transportation, a road project. Does anybody, right? So again, I see on this itemized list, there is an allocation for Fulton County. So I wanted to understand if they had approved that commitment in relation, because that would be a surprise if we have to go ahead and put something in to fill this gap. I'm just curious.
Well, so we brought that to the attention of our partners at Aerotropolis in every meeting that we've met with them on.
Okay.
I think they have been having conversations with Fulton County, and they've given the commitment that before this thing officially moves forward, they will provide us any clarity necessary.
That's right.
And so we expect them to do that.
Okay.
Thank you all so much.
And let me respond to that. One other note. So we asked GDOT if they would combine the 2 5-feet sidewalks to make the 10. It was Fulton County who came back to us and said that they still would require the 5-foot sidewalk to be built along with the 10. And so we went and met with Fulton County, and we said, that's your requirement. And if you require it, we are looking for you to pay for it. And so if they're not, and so our condition is, if you're not willing to pay for it, then there's no need for us to build it. And then after meeting with the city manager, he helped me to understand, to keep my eye on the ball and make sure that they don't pass that on to you. So we are very aware of that.
Okay.
Councilmember, for that, it's kind of twofold. So they are our partners in knowing that, hey, this cost can't get passed on to us. But then it's our fiscal responsibility to ensure that those things aren't being billed to us now charging us now so that they can coordinate it later. And so we'll hold our folks at Aerotropolis responsible for ensuring that Fulton County doesn't make a commitment that they are not on the hook for paying. And then our fiscal folks have the responsibility of looking at every invoice, the IGAs, et cetera, to make sure they don't sneak those costs in.
And then one other thing, I know we were talking about lighting, but that's a major intersection. They need street lights. As you think about growth down the line and the volume of traffic, those decorative lights don't give enough illumination, I think, so that's just, extra added.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you all.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, you may-
Yes, sir. Next item is a presentation made by Chief Judge Tiffany Seller, Municipal Court Quarterly Update.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, so before I begin, I transmitted to the council the actual quarterly report that had the facts and figures on it. Certainly, if you have any questions about that, please email me or contact me, and we can certainly discuss that. This is a high level. I try to give a quarterly update of things that happen in the court, because as you know, when you build something from nothing, there's constant changes, there are constant developments. And this I find is one of the best ways to be able to talk through some of those developments and discuss some issues, as well as some really exciting things that are happening in the court, okay? So the topics we're going to go into fourth quarter highlights. Wanted to have a discussion regarding the marijuana penalty, discussion regarding the use of Union City's courthouse in FY19, discussion regarding Women in Black, which is an interesting and exciting project for us that I will allow Ms. Jones, along with our special guest, to discuss, as well as a question and answer section. So fourth quarter highlights, there's a new addition to our team. The LBJ Law Group, which is Ms. Jones, the city solicitor, has hired a legal intern, and she's a Westlake graduate, so she is a daughter of the city of South Fulton, graduate of Louisiana State University. I believe she's in the first African-American SLU, and is currently a law student at Georgia State University. Of course, I'm going to mention she's my soror, which doesn't hurt anything either. All right, we have a new court program. It's called Be What You Can See. Thanks to Ms. Jones, we did a retake of our picture that went viral, but we did it with young girls. Ms. Jones' daughter is in it, my daughter is in it, as well as some other young ladies in our community. And really, this is a mentoring and shadowing program that's led by our Programs and Probations Manager, Ms. Tiffany. It allows students to come and observe the court and interact with officials. I will tell you that today was kind of the official launch of the program. We had students from Lithia Springs High School as well as students from Westlake High School in court with us today. Special thanks to the mayor and Councilwoman Roel, as well as Major Rogers, who I thought was here, but maybe not, who came and spoke to the students in addition to myself, Ms. Jones, Ms. Powell, and Ms. Henry. And so feedback and turnout was outstanding. That made for a very packed courtroom, but overall I thought the program went really, really well. The teachers, I think the vice principal from Lithia Springs High School was there. Overall, the program went really well. I think it showcased the excellence that exists in our city and with our team, and so I'm super proud of that. Certainly, if you have schools in your districts that want to come and be a part of that, that is not a problem. Thank you, Major Rogers. I saw you just grace us with your presence. If you have schools in your districts that want to be a part of it, or you know of young people who would benefit from watching court for the morning session of the Tuesday arraignment, just let us know, okay? I think we had almost 70 kids today, so we can accommodate a lot. Takes a little logistical know-how, so special thanks to the chief for providing us with some extra security today, but we're able to certainly accommodate that. All right, so discussion regarding the penalty for marijuana. So I'm going to start by saying the municipal court has no formal opinion, okay, about possession of marijuana, whether it should be arrestable. I do not have any formal opinion about that. But what I've seen is certainly an uptick in the citations that we're receiving around it. And particularly with our young people, okay? So let me give you an example. I think, was it last week, Ms. Jones, the week before last, we had 4 or 5 young people come into court, all smoking marijuana together with their parents, and their parents were looking for us to put the crack down on them, slap the hammer on them, do something. And I gave them $150 fine. And so the parents were like deflated because they were hoping, they were coming to us as a resource. They were hoping that we could provide some sort of educational requirements, civic engagement requirements, that's the term I'm going to use now, civic engagement requirements, community service requirements, things of that nature to course correct and help steer young people in proper directions. $150 fine, no one wants to do that. That is not a carrot to dangle. To the point that we have had situations where people bring marijuana to court. The problem is that they're in Union City and it's absolutely an arrestable offense in Union City. So they come to court on a City of South Fulton charge where the penalty may be between $75 and $150, and they end up getting arrested when they bring the marijuana into court. So what I'm asking or wanting to have a discussion about is allow us to use our creative programming to help people course correct. Whether it's arrestable or not my issue. But at $150, there's no incentive for them to do any of the activities that we want them to do. You know, for example, one of the community engagement or civic engagement components that Ms. Jones has ordered oftentimes is that people come to council meetings so that they can see how laws that affect them are made. Why would you come to a council meeting when you can walk out of court and pay $100? $150 ticket, let me just, to give you an example, following too closely in the City of South Fulton is a $200 ticket with a $26 surcharge for a total of $226. Possession of marijuana is less than that. It's probably one of the lowest citations that we have. And so it doesn't provide the direction, the course correction that I think particularly parents of young people want. At least that's what I'm hearing and seeing. And so I certainly would be doing a disservice to my job if I didn't bring that to your attention. I know I had that discussion with Councilman Khalid. You know, it's okay. We can disagree, but it's certainly my professional responsibility to bring it to your attention. Okay. Union City. So I guess I got all the hard topics today. I put them all on the same thing, but it's okay. We're gonna talk through it. So the Union City contract, our contract to use Union City's courthouse expires at the end of the year. The contract does have terms that you can proceed on a month-to-month basis. From the lawyer in me, and certainly defer to your city attorney, we have to provide notice every 30 days, which becomes very cumbersome. And we know we're going to be there longer than 30 days. I mean, from a practical standpoint, with the staffing that we have, I will be candid with you, there's no way that we can be out of there by the end of the year. It's just not practical. Today we had over 180 cases. We reset 80 of them, and we proceeded on 160 cases today. We have those calendars out through January. In order to reset all those people, I couldn't even tell you the level of staffing that I would need. I mean, it would be some ridiculous amount of people that we would have to reset and be able to maneuver to even try to get out of there by the end of the year. And so from a predictability standpoint, from a scheduling standpoint, Mr. Donald has been very gracious. We've been working with finding a semi-permanent to permanent solution, and I think we're both committed to doing that in the next fiscal year. But just from where we are right now, honestly, with the size calendars we have, Union City is the option. It's the only option that we see. And so certainly want to have that discussion as well. So this is the discussion regarding women in black. I'll turn it over to Ms. Jones. I guess all three of us will be up here and we'll introduce our special guest.
Yes. Good evening, Council, Mayor. I am excited to get an opportunity to bring you something fun tonight. I hope you guys find it as fun as we do. I'll give you a little bit of background. Everyone knows about the viral photo and what happened when we took the picture. But what you all don't know is what happened behind the scenes, which is we had an overwhelming number of news sources as well as production companies that wanted to document exactly what we were talking about as it relates to this brand new city. Every newscaster that came in to talk about us, I always started with, City of South Fulton is the best little city in America. And y'all know, everybody knows I'm South Fulton's #1 cheerleader, and I always believe that. And then I saw the presentation tonight, and those were the receipts. People need to see that. And so what we are bringing to you today is an opportunity that intertwines a number of different things that we've already heard today. Economic development, showcasing who we are, be what you can see, exhibiting the examples that we have in the city. So I want to introduce to you Miss Catherine Vaughn. She is with Good Caper, and she is going to tell you a little bit more about the project.
Hi there, I'm Catherine Vaughn. Thank y'all so much for letting me be here tonight. This has been so fascinating. So to tell you a little bit about me, I'm one of the production companies that when I saw that article written about the Municipal Court, the amazing work and these women and the whole court, when I read that article, I went, why, these are the television shows that need to be made. So you understand a little bit about me. I've been producing television for, just about 15 to 20 years. My kind of area of specialty is what I call sort of feel-good television and also really documentary television. I started by working on a show called Extreme Makeover Home Edition. I did that for years. It gave me the opportunity to go around the country and meet a lot of amazing folks and learn how to tell stories that I feel like a lot of folks want to see. My career took a lot of different turns, but for the past 6 or 7 years, I've been working specifically on crime and investigation programming and working hand in hand with law enforcement agencies, courthouses, and families across the country on a variety of shows. One that I'm most proud of is a show called Cold Justice, which I created about 6 years ago, which is still on. It's in its 5th season. And it follows cold case investigators going around the country and trying to help local law enforcement agencies solve cold homicide cases. So it's interesting. My work now, I work on at a company called ITV America, which is a very large production company. And what they have is they have many different, what we call umbrellas and production companies underneath their purview. The company that I run is called Good Caper Content. We focus specifically on crime and investigation programming. And what that means is we can work hand in hand with law enforcement and courts, and we understand how to do that and how to do that carefully. So if I can speak really honestly, when you talk about reality television and you talk about some of those entertaining programs like Real Housewives and things like that, those programs are produced very differently than how you would produce a program that takes place in a courthouse, takes place in a police department, takes place in a sheriff's office. So I think when these women had this article written about them and they had all these production companies contact them, I would imagine one of the things that stood out about our production company is that we do understand that we're going to need to work with y'all to make this happen and make sure we're going through the legal parameters carefully. And then I was able to come down and meet with them and we all just hit it off. So I have a very exciting vision for what this show can be. To me, what they do on their day-to-day lives in the court was so fascinating. I sat for 2 straight days watching them in court, watching them interact with your citizens from young to old, from first-time offenders to repeat offenders, from little tiny speeding charges to shoplifting charges. And I found the way that they had your community members come through their court was fascinating, was fair, and really inspiring. So I want to feature that, but also I just want to feature a little bit of these gals, because I don't know how well you know them, but they're really fun and interesting. So we put together this, what we call a pitch reel. We have not gone out into the world to pitch this show yet, and that's because these gals wanted you all to know what was happening, to feel comfortable about it, to ask any questions that you may have. because it is going to reflect on your city. And if you all do feel comfortable with it, then we can talk about how we will go through things like paperwork, which I know the city attorney will be very interested in. And so without further ado, I'll stop yammering and I'll let you see the tape that we made.
We are the first all-black, all-women-run court system ever.
South Fulton is Georgia's newest city.
It is a huge gym where African Americans lead with excellence. Doctors, lawyers, business professionals.
Buppies. Like a yuppie, but a puppy.
Wait, I'm sorry. A yuppie but a puppy, is that a black yuppie?
Yes, yes.
Every day is this. I was getting 200 people. It's like, hold on. Oftentimes people of color feel like they're worked by the system. But in our court, it's more fair and it's more creative. We have gone so far as to start people to register to vote. We make young people come back with life plans. Thank you. The goal is to reintegrate them back into our community as successful citizens. I am kind of young to be a judge. But I'm a judge who believes in respect. He's right, you get confused. She's an alpha woman. I'm a mama to two amazing children. They are my whys. And why I do it, why I work so hard, why I try to do the best. Resolve is one tough cookie.
In addition to being a prosecutor, I am an entrepreneur. I run a political consulting business. If you're not for progress, then you gotta get out of the way. I also appear on television quite often, and I am working on a couple of great books right now. I don't know.
But my client is pleased and satisfied with the result that we have. I'm good.
And Ms. Powell has been practicing law for 30 years, which is about the amount of time that I've been on this earth.
Judge combined, they're at least 50 years younger than me. Can you imagine dealing with that? Seriously. Okay.
We argue. They're shooting jabs at each other like Dragon Ball Z, where you just like, it gets testy with us sometimes. I absolutely love it. It's almost like just sitting there watching popcorn, like, ooh, this is good.
Ms. Powell wants to win every battle. LaDawn wants to win the war.
I love it. It makes my job a lot more entertaining than sitting there doing a little pile. I want to be like a boss chick, but not the word chick. Something that starts with B, but rhymes with chick, kind of, sort of.
Super smart girl.
Excellent, excellent. My hobby is community service.
She's going to be a dynamic attorney. Certainly in the political climate that we live in, there's a lot of discussion about criminal justice system.
There is a lack of trust in law enforcement. There is a lack of trust with the justice system. And we are pioneers and people who are in the forefront fighting for change, period.
So they have great personalities, and we're very excited about that. Look, any questions that you guys have, this again would be the tape that we would take out into the world and hopefully have a network that would be excited to put this show on. You know, I was interested, I was sitting next to these guys, I'll say one last thing. You know, when you bring a production like this into your town, not only do you get to feature your town and show how great this city is, brand new city, flourishing. I got excited by the first gentleman who presented, talking about mom and pop businesses, getting them to be open here. This is the type of thing, we see that sort of, when we feature a city like this on TV, a lot of times that can bring eyes and acknowledgement of a city. The other thing is being in production in your city. I've talked to these guys about little things like we have folks that will need to be put up in hotels. If you have hotels that are here, we would love to hire from within the city. Opportunities like being PAs, being assistant cameras on the crew. That's a great way for your young people to get an experience in entertainment. And then you're going to see little business opportunities too, like we got to feed our crew every day. So I'm sure y'all have some restaurants that we can buy from. So there's little benefits in that way too, which I should mention.
Thank you. So I guess we can ask questions of like the whole presentation if you want to break it up by section. Did want to point out that this production uses no city resources. So there will be $0 used in terms of from the city for the production. complete no city resources. As you know, Ms. Jones, Ms. Powell, and I are all independent contractors. Ms. Webb is I guess, an independent contractor of Ms. Jones. And so there's no city resources that's being used to put this production on. So but we did want to bring it to you because we think that it is outstanding. I think it's an outstanding way to showcase the city in a very positive light.
Any questions?
Several. I really think that we have to break this up.
You gave us all these tough topics and then you gave us
Did.
this little icing
I
on
only
the
come
cake.
before you once a quarter.
Okay, I'll start. First of all, that is amazing. I am very excited about it. I think it's a testament to what we can do when we own who we are as a city. And there are several schools. I graduated from one of them, Tri-Cities as a Visual Performing Arts High School. I went on to film school. I got my start there, and there's also South Fulton Career Academy. So neither one of those are actually in our city limits, but they're right next to our city, and many of our kids go to those schools. So you definitely will have people to hire there. I'm all on board about that, but I do want to go back to
Marijuana.
the marijuana. Well, first, I'm actually going to work my way backwards. What is the status of, I've heard a lot of conversation about this Meadows facility and about city halls. I've heard lots of different things. I think that it will be easier for those of us who are reticent to sign another year lease with Union City. I'm not saying that I'm either one of those people, but for people who are, I think that knowing when the end date is going to be is a lot more helpful. So if we could hear from our city manager, our facilities manager, that by January 2019, we're definitely going to be in this location. This is definitely the last year we will be using someone else's courthouse. That might be helpful.
We can hold those conversations for executive session when we discuss real estate.
Okay. And so we have a National League of Cities conference every year, and we went to Los Angeles. Just serendipity was held in Los Angeles this year. Of course, Los Angeles has legalized marijuana for both recreational and medicinal use. I attended several sessions about that, and even visited a dispensary, which will be in my next video newsletter. Thank you for that. But so legalization is coming. Like, we can't, I don't know when it's going to arrive in Georgia, but just like the lottery, just like everything else that we said no to until we saw how much money was being made off of it in other places, it's eventually going to be a thing. So I don't think that, and one of the things that we learned from one of the National League of Cities trainers, Colorado, they've had the longest history of medicinal and recreational use. And so they have the most data available. One of the things that they have seen is that there's been that when marijuana is legalized or decriminalized, there is an uptick in juvenile use, but then that usually tapers off. And they actually are finding that adults are using more. And so my first question is, what percentage of arrests are actually juveniles? Because you gave some sort of anecdotal evidence, but do you have even quantitative evidence there?
So I think as it relates to arrests, I think you probably defer to the police department, because that's not something that we do. What I said, I don't have an opinion about
Right.
arrests.
So what percentage of cases that actually make it to you
I'd have to pull those numbers. We don't have
Juveniles?
are people under 18?
For possession of marijuana?
Yes.
It's very few that we've seen, but I'll get you those numbers. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but we can find out.
Right.
It's not
I
many.
mean, like, we heard these like compelling accounts of parents bringing their kids to us to help. But if that's like 3 parents out of 100 cases, I don't know. I don't want to like legislate based on anecdotal evidence.
So I know we talk about children, but it's more than children. So you all, as the judge mentioned earlier, you have sitting amongst you now some people who are here as a part of our diversion program. They're grown. These are 30-year-old folks. They just don't have a record, and they broke laws like driving ATVs, Councilwoman, and so they're here to understand why they make those laws. So it's not just for 17-year-olds, because we don't do 16-year-olds. There are different things that we can incorporate, and it varies. It's a case-by-case scenario, right? If you have a self-employed person that is has a family and all these things, you may handle them different than someone who comes in and is unemployed, stays with their mom, and they're caught with marijuana. So there's some other things we can do, but I'll be happy to provide those numbers otherwise.
Thank you. And I know I'm probably going to differ from some of my colleagues, but one of the things that we learn, we go to all of these trainings, is really counseling. One of the things we learn in our GMA training is that we always have to focus on like what is the good we're trying to do, what is the harm we're trying to avoid. So if the good that we're trying to do is get more people into programs or community service or classes or any of those things, then let's just do that, right? So let's not, I don't think that we need to raise the fine to pressure people into going to programs. We can just amend the law to say that the fine will now be 1,000 hours of community service versus this other thing. Is that not an option?
So I think that we're looking at it a little differently.
Okay.
It's not that I'm up here advocating that you raise the fine. What I'm up here advocating is that you allow us to be creative in how we address a potential issue, okay? When your fine is $150, no one wants to hear pretrial diversion. It's not even a discussion. No one wants to talk about it. Right. They come in there, they pay their fine, they want to go home and do whatever it is that they want to do. There's no incentive. That's the issue. The issue is that we want to incentivize good behavior, because I'll tell you this, even though possession of marijuana may be a city ordinance, guess what? You're still guilty of a city ordinance violation. Whereas if you complete pretrial diversion, you get a dismissal. Guilty, dismissal. Those are words that everybody understands, right? So it doesn't matter if you have a record of city ordinance violations that's 20 long. You can have dismissals. That's the goal. The goal is to get people in programs where they end up with dismissals. So I think that if there's a good that can come out of it, that's it. Today I think we had about 6 or 7 people just straight, and it was a shoplifting day to day, I don't know. But people who completed the program successfully, got dismissals. And so I think that when we're talking about preserving people's records, it's not giving them $150 fines that does it, it's the dismissals.
Right, so again, my question is, if the goal is to get people in the programs, can we just mandate the program?
So technically, yes, you can do that. I would not, if you ask my professional opinion, recommend that, because no matter how much time you guys spend talking it through and thinking out, here are the things you should include, you cannot really understand the distinctions between cases. It's very case by case. I'm very proud of South Fulton. We don't just have files, we don't have numbers. We really dig in to find out, what do you have going on in your life? What can we do to make it better? I will tell you, the number one thing that I would probably recommend that people do if they were caught with marijuana is I would want them to take a class to understand addiction. Because for one person, it may not make a difference. For somebody else, it may make a huge difference. That class is $95, right? So when you start putting those things together, right, that's where you need a little bit more room to help you accomplish your goal. But yes, you could technically do that. I wouldn't recommend it.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Willis, and let me just say this, that at some point in time, we're going to have to take a small recess, maybe about 10 minutes, and I'll get Ms. Willis close it out. Okay, I guess you want to take that 10-minute recess. All right. Ms. Willis, and I did see you.
You did, but she answered my question.
Okay, good. Ms. Rob and then Mr. Baker.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that if we do decide to move forward with this broadcast, that we are not portrayed as a crime-riddled black city. I just want to make sure that does not happen.
And I think that's the reason why, I'll be honest, we had over 20 companies reach out to us. Ms. Jones is outstanding in scheduling, and so we met with all these people via Skype. They were from England, Canada, LA, New York, I mean everywhere. What attracted us to Ms. Vaughn is that when you watch these shows, Cold Case, that's been on TV for 6 years, her work speaks for itself. Those towns don't look like crime-ridden wherever they are. I think that they couch it in a way that respects not only the city and the citizens, but brings positivity to the community. And so certainly, I'm not flipping tables. I'm just not a table flipping chair. And so I don't think that, you know, I know these young ladies here don't do that either. So I'm not, that wouldn't happen because that's not what I do.
I also would like to see the show extended beyond just the courts. I mean, I think it's a good thing, but we have a law enforcement division, we have a police division, we even have a council. And so, although I feel like the court is a good thing, but we have other things in our city that makes us first. The other thing, I want to move on because we have to, we have to recess. The other thing is the downside about what I saw in Los Angeles with marijuana being legalized is a lot of homelessness. I also saw people walking the street. You would think when you hear Broadway, Hollywood Walk of Fame, you're going to walk into a very nice area. I was highly disappointed. I was even more disappointed to see people light up joints in the face of me and my mayor. And so I voted against the decriminalization of marijuana, and I stand by my vote. Number one, I did a survey in my district, and majority of the people who live in District 3 did not want that. Two, while we may keep people out of jail for possessing less than an ounce of marijuana, they still have to take that drug test to get a job. And so one of the reasons I did not support the ordinance is because I don't think it's punitive enough. I do agree with House Representative, I'm not House Representative, sorry, Solicitor Don Blackett-Jones. It does need to be more punitive to encourage people to take advantage of the diversion programs. We want to help people to get them away, to get off of drugs. So I do think we need to look at making it more punitive.
Ms. Brown?
First, I want to say that I had the opportunity to, host a group of Westlake students today at your court, and what I saw was absolute excellence. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
But what was most powerful was the comments from the attendees, from the students who actually observed your court. And so I think the impact can be huge. One of the questions I asked the young ladies, did you see a career today display that you weren't aware that you could see yourself in? And the feedback was just very positive and actually moving. So I want to thank you, the dignity you give to people who come in front of your courtroom, the efficiency and how it's operated. I still am amazed how you saw all those people in the 2 or 3 hours that I was there. So I want to thank you for that, and I actually think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Mr. Baker, and we'll close with Ms. Hill.
Okay, thank you so much. You did give us a whole lot this evening, and we thank you. I thank you definitely for everything, including your perspective on the ordinance as well. I just like to say that all the other ordinance is one of those things that, again, I said it earlier, and Khalid kind of mentioned that Georgia is on the cusp of a change. We see that with the elections from last week. We understand, and I understand, I only digest the conservative nature of a lot of people who are from here. With that said, we have 8 cities in the state of Georgia who have decriminalized marijuana. 5 of them occurred after our ordinance. And we still have the highest financial penalty. $150 is the highest that anybody in the state charges. Like when we talk about these conferences that we go to, and Khalid mentioned how it doesn't, and there's no evidence. I was interested in the answer from Solicitor Jones, and her answer was that there are very few, again, very few young people who are repeat offenders when it comes to this ordinance. And if history hasn't taught us anything, criminalizing marijuana, stiffer penalties on marijuana, has not served historically to be a deterrent. It hasn't, and that's just a fact, which is part of the reason we wanted to be on the right side of history when it came to this. And to contend that the homelessness situation in Los Angeles County is something that can be contributed to the legalization or even for medical or recreational marijuana. I don't see the parallel. I don't even think that we can draw the parallel. I think that when we look at the way that this ordinance was written, making it a civil offense, which is the way that it should be actually prosecuted, I think that there is leeway when it comes to the fact that in the ordinance, half of the penalty of that 150 is supposed to go towards some type of diversionary program already, which still makes us unique in that effort. Also, outside of that penalty, when it comes to the fact that legalization is coming to a city near us really, really soon, and I've been taught over the past year and a half almost that we've been up here to kind of stay in my lane, and this has been my lane, and my lane has been to actually research, go to these conferences, find out what best practices are, what other people are doing to be effective, and that's what we've done, and that's what we are. And I think that this is a mistake. I think when we started out our presentations, Christopher Pike started out to show us our economic development strategies and where we're going as a city. And I don't think that we are looking at getting more money off things and stiffer penalties for marijuana offenses to bring us either more money to our court system or more money to our city. I think we're just barking up something that is not on the right side of history, and I think that time is going to really tell that really soon. So I would, albeit I appreciate it, and anything else like that, we would love to hear it. Anything else is not effective, as well as this, just so we could be, on task properly. But I think that I'm totally against any changes when it comes to that. Thank you.
That's fine.
All right, thank you, Mr. Baker. Thank you, Judge, and all the staff for a wonderful job that you do.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to take about a 10-minute recess, and we'll come back. If we go right to the body, we'll come back and hear the other two items before we go into our regular meeting. Is that okay? Is everybody? Everybody all right with that?
I'm sorry.
We would take 10 minutes and we would come back and those two items will finish with that.
Are we going in executive session?
No. Okay? All right.
We're on break now?
Yes. We're going to go to executive session after the meeting.
So we're going to finish the regular meeting by 9. You have it for 10, 10:30. Huh? We talked about this. I got
We're going to take this time to continue with our agenda. Mr. Burke, you call the next item?
Yes. If I understand you correctly, you want to take them in reverse order?
Yes.
Okay. Resolution establishing a process for the naming and renaming of public facilities or infrastructures and for other lawful purposes. This is a discussion item that was placed on the work session agenda as requested and is sponsored by Councilmember Willis.
Councilmember Willis.
So this is a resolution I would like for all of my colleagues to look at, and this is just the process of renaming public facilities. And basically, I looked at what other cities are doing, to see what precedents that has been set. And there are various processes in place in other cities. But what's consistent in other cities is that before they rename anything, after any constituent or anybody that has contributed significantly to the community, there is community input and typically some type of public hearing of sort. And depending on what they're renaming, is typically residents they ask to give input who live in a specific vicinity of the public facility that's being named. And so what I did was pull the policy that Fulton County currently has in place, and basically what Fulton County policy, and I kind of revised it, and what Fulton County policy calls for is for a renaming committee to be put in place. And that renaming committee consists of, I'm asking for it to be the resident of, 2 residents from the community, the department division head, the facilities director, and also our economic development director to be on this renaming committee. The renaming committee would review the request to rename the facility, and then they will send their recommendation on to the city manager, and then the city manager would make the recommendation to council, and then we will vote on the recommendation to rename any public facility. So that is the gist of the policy, and I ask that we put something in place, because as we are a new city, we're implementing a lot of infrastructure. We want to capture the historical significance of the things that are in our city. We haven't even put our historical markers in place. We have a historical preservation committee, and we might want to loop them in at some point. And we want to make sure that we're preserving our history. We want to make sure that we're naming our public facilities after individuals with significance. I recall that when the mayor tried to name Scarborough Road after Cam Newton, now he has made significant contributions to the sports world, but the residents came out in protest against it because they felt that it was too soon to name a street after Cam Newton. So that's why you see all of the signs, instead of the street being renamed Cam Newton, you see the signs and markers placed all over the place. That was a compromise. And so I don't want us to get into a community fight about renaming our facilities after people. I want us to build consensus and make sure that we're careful and thoughtful before we rename public facilities after individuals. So I welcome the feedback. That's why I asked the mayor to allow us to put it on the work session for us to discuss it and vet it, and then we can vote on it at our regular meeting.
Okay, I have Mr. Khalid, Ms. Rouse, and Ms. Gunn.
Ms. Walker, in your survey of cities and all the cities that Venture Denmark works with, do they have a naming committee?
I'm not aware. I know, I'll say I'm not aware of one. So during our representation, like for College Park, we've represented them the last 10 years. It's never come up. Without specifically looking at the code, I'm not sure. But when Councilwoman Willis did send me her request, I did look at several cities, and there are several cities that do have naming committees, so I think it's just the discretion of the council.
Is there a boilerplate or an average, or are cities all over the place in how they do what they do?
They were all over the place for the most part, being that Fulton County had a policy that was more lengthy than average. Some had just, like a time frame from death, age restriction. So it's just, it's very city specific. It's what's best for the local jurisdiction seems to be the aim of various cities.
Okay, and then there is in section, I won't find it now because I'm on the mic, but there is no facilities, it's section B, the criteria for naming. And we have like, paragraph 5 says that no building or structure will be named after a person who is a current member. And then there's one for people being over 75. I know that sometimes naming can be political, right? And so we want to avoid that. My suggestion for that would be, we have an ethics ordinance. I know that there are probably a couple, but I know that there's definitely one that is coming to the agenda hopefully next meeting, Mr. Mayor. And we put a moratorium on names. We put a moratorium on filing. Well, the ethics ordinance contemplates a moratorium on ethics filings between the qualification period and the certification of the election. And so I think that might be, again, the good we're trying to do is make sure that this process isn't politicized. I think that we should probably consider not naming things between qualification periods and certification period, because according to this ordinance, if there was someone who was, say, 76 and was intending to run for office in 2019, there's nothing that prevents that person from being named, from a candidate, right, having something named after them. And so I think that if the good that we're trying to do is avoid politicization, then qualification and certification might be better than some of these specific things. But I think it might just be a bit overkill. Are we voting on this tonight? No. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Rob?
So I have a couple of questions, particularly as it relates to the composition. It seems interesting, and I think what I'm concerned about under composition A1, it speaks to special consideration being given to selecting citizens who are from a community in which the facility is located. I think if we have a renaming committee, you could have requests coming in from anywhere across the city. That particular piece, I don't even think could be addressed. It could be an issue. And also, does our charter speak to, because this is something we talked about with the ordinance we're working on now, is that each city council person is supposed to have an appointee?
Have an appointee
to any boards that are established?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that requirement.
Please check that. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'll double check.
Please double check it. But again, so again, in terms of this composition, how does that mirror the one that was adopted or in place under Fulton County? Can you speak to that, Councilwoman Lewis?
Yes, you're looking at it. So all I did was change. All I did was the difference between Fulton counties and this is that Fulton County had their public works director included on the name and rename committee. I took the public works director off, and I said we should have our facilities manager, because our facilities manager is responsible for maintaining our buildings and most of the facilities in our city. And so because public works was being outsourced, I think it would be more appropriate for our facilities manager to be on the work. And the county did not have an economic development director on the renaming committee. I think because we're talking about renaming something, it's important to have the weight in of the economic developer, because we want to make sure we're not doing anything that's going to impact our economic development.
So again, my question had to, which it is different, because they wouldn't have had a city manager. You're saying that they have public works, and our model also has the public works as an employee of the city, not a contractor. Is that correct, city manager?
Correct.
So at the last council meeting, I gave you a copy of Fulton County's policy, I gave you a copy of Savannah's policy, I gave you a copy of Atlanta's, so you have a copy of all of the
I
policies.
did not have time to read all that. I just wanted to understand the difference relative to this. So again, and I really wanted to compare to Fulton County, not all those other cities. So they had 3 or 4 people, it sounds like. Is that correct?
No, they had the division head, they had 2 residents, they had the public works director, and they had 1 other person. I think it was like 5 people on the renaming committee.
Okay.
But again, I gave you a copy of it. So this is the work session. So between now and when we have to vote on it, you will have plenty of time to prepare it.
Well, I want to make sure I have my questions answered. And secondly, I do think at some point, Public Works, again, because they're a city employee, makes sense. Because if we ever look at changing roads or whatever, your facilities person wouldn't have that information, but your Public Works director would. So I think that one at a minimum needs to be looked at relative to that. So that's just general feedback before we ever get to the point to vote on this.
That's good feedback. I would ask, Mayor, that if anybody has feedback before we vote on this, please send that information, because what we typically like to do is we like to wait the day when we vote on something to have a lot of debate. We have plenty of time between now and November 27th. And so I will ask you have this. You've been given a copy of the current Fulton County policy. You have this. You have other cities I've shared with you. And please send your feedback so we can make sure that this is done and ready to go when we need to vote on the 27th.
Councilwoman Gunn.
So I think also my questions were regarding the committee. So what we're proposing is a 7-member committee for each project. So it has 2 open member slots. What are the 2 open members?
Residents.
And but it also has 2 city residents as well on a rotating basis. So is that 4 or is that just 2? Because it's kind of.
Well, the 2 open member slots will be, for example, if it's a citywide facility that we're renaming, you don't want to specifically say that a person has to be named, has to live in a specific area. It could be someone that the mayor want to appoint or the council as a whole want to appoint. The 2 city residents who shall serve on a rotating basis. Oh, the 2 open slots will be, we talked about that. We talked about a corporation. We want to put somebody on from a corporation on our facility. And we could talk about that in executive session because that came up. Say somebody wants to, like for example, Atlanta has named their stadium Mercedes-Benz. And so do we want to, we want to hold that for executive session. The city manager is asking us to hold that for executive session.
And the city manager would be the one appointing, and the city manager would be the one that's appointing these individuals to this.
Yes. And we're talking about it in executive session. I can't down on that right now.
Okay.
To the open slot. We talk about it.
Okay.
Wait a minute, I'm trying to complete. Okay, I'll hold the minutes and questions.
Okay.
And Mayor, I actually have the answers to Councilwoman Brown's questions that the council wants to hear now. The first question was, what does the charter say about the appointment of committees? And I'll read you the language. It says that all committee and committee chairpersons and officers of the city council shall be appointed as prescribed by ordinance or resolution. That basically puts it at your discretion to pick committee formation. And then
is it another part in there that speaks to the board's establishment somewhere in the
not that, so as far as boards,
it may have been an ordinance. I just remember something in the past that spoke to that. I thought it was the charter, but.
well, you have several ordinances in place that establish committee formation. Like you have your ZBA, your planning commission, your public arts commission.
And they all have an appointee.
Correct, and they all vary, just specific to that ordinance.
But all of them have appointees, with the only exception being, which then, once we started looking at ethics, they all have an appointee by every member of this council.
That's correct, and I think what Councilwoman Rowell is saying is that historically, this council specifically has created committees through each person getting an appointee.
But you said something about ethics, you said that's the way.
I said with the exception of the ethics ordinance, and I'm recalling, and again, I'll go, trust me, by the next meeting, I'll do my homework. I don't know if it was a charter or ordinance, it was something that spoke to that, but we don't need to belabor it as this conversation. I'll have it by the time we look at it.
Okay, and then the next question was who is on the committee for Fulton County, and I have their resolution pulled up, and it says, thank you, the county manager, the director of the department, which is the, in this case, I think it's the recreation department, the director of public buildings and grounds department, the director of public works, 2 members of the public on a rotating basis who shall reside in the community, and then 2 open member slots. And then the county manager, similar to the ordinance that, the resolution that we have makes those open slot appointments.
And this committee is interchangeable per project, correct?
Yes. And
So it's not
can you
one.
speak on it?
You were talking about you.
Ms. Gomes? Oh, no, whoever can answer it, so. So my question is this a rotating per project?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, some of the positions are going to be rotating, like when you specifically designate someone, it's going to be like.
I think maybe I'm more concerned about the city resident piece.
Yeah, the open
was
slots
the
is
one,
completely
yes.
up to Mr. Donald to assess the project and see who is more appropriate for that particular running.
Right.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Mayor, can you give me some feedback? Because I took a lot of this verbiage from the county and I looked at what other cities are doing. In some cities, they don't allow you to name facilities after anybody unless you're dead. You know, and then some cities make you wait 5 years after a person has died before they name a facility after somebody. So I just want to get your feedback on what you think about this policy and how it worked when you were commissioned.
I just think that, and for the first time, I think that the important thing is input from the community. That is utmost. Those who live in the community, those who, even though they may live in, they may be in District 1, but somebody from 4 and 5 may have something to say about that too. So I think that's the most important part. In Fulton County, if you were a sitting commissioner, you could not get anything named after you. The last person who did that was Tom Love. They named the shooting range after Tom Love, you remember, during the Olympics, because Tom Love was a great Olympic shooter. But it was if you were an elected official on that board, you could not. The other thing was that in Fulton County, you had to be dead to get something basically named after you. So they go to those extremes. But what we have to make clear here is like the attorney said, you know, we're going to set, Ms. Rouse, we set the policy through ordinance. We'll set what we want to do. And it's always good to look back on historically what other people have done, but you have to make it fit what you want. You know, so I don't want to name something after one of y'all when y'all dead. I want to leave flowers while you living. But name it. This is a very important thing to do, though. It really is. And like Mr. Khalid said, you know, you take the politics out of it. You know, take the politics out of it and make it fair. So that's what we did for the country. Okay? All right. Next.
The next discussion item is transferring code enforcement to the police department. It's also sponsored by Councilmember Willis.
Ms. Willis?
Yes, I would like to bring up Chief Meadows, also the current Shell Reed, and then I also want to bring up our HR director, Ms. Aquila Henderson. The reason I'm asking these 3 individuals to come up, I've met with them, and I've also met with Frank Malazzi, and there was support for this ordinance, but there's been several conflicting communication that has come out since this, and I just want all of us to get on the same page. Now, before we transition the code enforcement department over to the city, they were under police. Okay. I've also done my research and talked with other cities because there's always precedence. We don't have to reinvent the wheel in the city of South Fulton. Sometimes things have already been done and we can just ask how it works. So in Union City, they have police under code enforcement. In East Point, they have police under code enforcement. And Atlanta, they have police under code enforcement. Code enforcement, sorry. Code enforcement under police. Thank you, Mayor, for correcting me. And I've asked all of them, how it works, how it's working for them, and what was consistent is they like it because most of the code enforcement issues are related to the crime issues. And they were able to expedite a lot of the code enforcement issues faster with it being under code, and they had access to more resources because police get more grants. So they had access to more equipment. And so I was lobbied, I'm going to be transparent, by many employees, and I've asked them to come tonight and speak up because they felt that they were able to compare the difference, and they feel that it's better for code enforcement to be back under police. And I would like for Chief Meadows to come up and ask, number one, speak about code enforcement being under police. If you think it's something that should be done now, if it's something that can be handled, and give your opinion about it.
Well, certainly we want what's in the best interest, of the city, and I've been in jurisdictions where code enforcement falls under police and it works out very well. I've been in jurisdictions where it falls under other areas and it works out similarly as well. I think you hit on one key point, and that's that a lot of our code enforcement issues are directly related to crime issues. And so from that end, I think it would help from a policing standpoint to address them in a more comprehensive way. And so that code enforcement has that support from law enforcement so that we can try to help alleviate our communities from some of these issues. And so certainly, as I said, I've seen it work well in both areas, and we certainly would want to make sure that we put in the appropriate protocols so that we can make sure that we're addressing all of our communities' concerns as we move forward.
And at this time, code enforcement has four positions that are budgeted but have not been hired for. Will that give you the resources that you need in order to, and we talked with Ms. Henderson, and Ms. Henderson told Chief Meadows and myself, once code enforcement is moved on the police, he will have jurisdiction to move those positions around in any way possible. I also want to dispel any rumors that may have been said. I think Ms. Reed has done an excellent job for the 9 months that code enforcement has been under planning. I think she is an exceptional leader. This is not about Ms. Reed. This is about the role. Right. And what's in the best interest of the city and what's in the best interest of handling code enforcement issues. I've had an opportunity to visit many cities, and one of the most important things they told me that was important for their economic development was code enforcement, making sure that there are strict code enforcement guidelines and procedures in place. And so now getting back to the four funded positions that have not been filled, will that give you the resources you need? And do you feel like you have enough resources to make this move? Because the CFO said that we need to make this move as of October.
October 1st is his So to answer your question, yes, it would be. And to echo your comments about Ms. Reed, I've had an exceptional working relationship with Ms. Reed up until this point, and I have no doubt that that will continue, as we move forward. But yes, I believe that would give us the resources that we need. As you know, the police department is a paramilitary organization, so I would have to make sure there's a combination of some sworn structures put in place to oversee the day-to-day operations of the code enforcement section. And so that's something that we'll be able to work through with the resources that are available.
Okay, we have Ms. Gilliard, Mr. Khalid, Ms. Guns, Ms. Rao. Is anybody else? Because I'm going to close it out with Ms. Rao. All right, Ms. Rao, I'm going to close it out.
Hi, Chief.
Hey, Councilwoman, how are you?
So, what would your organization chart look like?
Right.
Number one, if it was transferred over to the police department, and what are the titles of the 4 vacant positions?
Okay, it's my understanding the 4 vacant positions are code enforcement officer positions.
Okay.
And so the way our organizational structure will change is that we'll take a captain and put her over the code enforcement section. We would have some sworn supervision there, and then we would also create a liaison position for a police officer to ensure that there's a uniform presence with the code enforcement personnel when they're out in those challenging areas, trying to carry out their day-to-day duties. My expectation is that each one of the code enforcement officers will have a responsibility to various sections of the city of South Fulton. They'll be responsible for putting together a plan of action to address code enforcement issues. I'll give you, for instance, Ms. Ransom, she's read me the riot act about code enforcement, and she has certain issues that she, quite frankly, wants addressed. Well, it would be their responsibility to put together those plans to address our community issues, making sure that it's being reported up through the sworn structure, up to and including myself, to make sure that they're carried out weekly, and to make sure that they have the proper tools and resources to get that job done.
So, the code enforcement manager would report to the captain, and the officer would be the one that would work in conjunction with the manager when the code enforcement officers are assigned in the field.
Absolutely.
That's how it's supposed to work.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Khalid, Mr. Khalid, go ahead.
So, if we were to make this change, is it something that we're going to vote on tonight?
It's not a work session, it's a line item discussion. It's an agenda discussion.
Okay, but we're not taking action tonight, so we got time. If we were to bring it under police, would the code enforcement officers be armed? Would they get additional, like, post-certification training? Like, what support are you able to give them under police that you couldn't just give them under code enforcement?
So I'm not opposed to post-certification. I've seen a hybrid approach where it works in different jurisdictions and different capacities. So I'm not completely opposed to that. I've had conversations with actually some citizens that are here tonight about the potential of giving them additional tools to arm and protect themselves. And I'm not opposed to that either. But certainly you have to train to those tools. You can't just start handing them out. So we want to make sure we know what that process looks like. We want to make sure that we create the appropriate policies and that we're training to those policies as well.
And so for our for our HR director, Ms. Dennison, and our budget manager, how would that change their pay scale? Because we also today are going to be approving pay in class. With their pay in class change, with the budget that we have, with their salaries change once they become post-certified?
Well, I guess, good evening, first of all. We would have to look into what those incentives would be, but as it stands, the positions as budgeted would be their salary.
Right. And then if that were to be the case, and they were post-certified, and they were armed, if people don't want to do that, can they still be code enforcement officers?
Absolutely. And see, the only reason that you want to even consider that as a possibility, and if they went through and became post-certified, then they would have to automatically heat up one of our police positions. And I just want to be clear about that. So there wouldn't be a huge change with respects to the budget. Well, there wouldn't be any change in the budget because they would be assuming one of our police positions. But at the same time, we have to understand the impact that position would bring to our overall crime reduction strategies. I use the analogy all the time that when you have blighted properties throughout your communities, certainly and that contributes to your burglary problem. In other words, people breaking into your homes. And so the reason we know that happens is because when we go into a lot of these blighted properties after burglaries occur, we will find television sets and things that have been taken out of other people's homes because they use those blighted properties to store stolen items in them. And so having that person there in that capacity certainly helps us to identify those problematic areas and helps us to reduce the numbers that we're ultimately seeking to reduce.
And so for me, I'm glad you brought that up. I'm gonna make a little speech. In my community, in my district, in my neighborhood, we don't have people complaining about there not being enough code enforcement officers. It's the enforcement part of code enforcement that is a problem. So my residents aren't interested in armed code enforcement officers citing blighted property. They want the blighted property demolished. And so I think a better use of these 4 vacant positions, and I would also like to talk to Ms. Cofield, who is our court administrator, and Ms. I always think LBJ, our solicitor, is I want to better understand that process, because I have a dozen deputized code enforcement residents. Miss Lindsay comes to mind. Like I get an email, I get a code enforcement report from her every week, and she is not, she's just a resident. So we know where the properties are, but in terms of being able to go after absentee landlords, being able to do that research when a house has been resold 3, 4, 5 times, being able to go down in court and file all of those briefs and paperwork and all of that. I want to better understand. And I wonder, could all of our court people, I guess you can sit where you are, but Ms. Jones and Ms. Cofield, what is the, so there's a house, we saw it on my economic development tour, it's leaning over, it can't even stand up, there's literally a hole in the house.
Is that the blue one?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't need any more people to write it up, we just need it to be taken down. So what is that process? What is your capacity like right now to handle the cases for all of the blighted properties? Why aren't they coming down? Is it a time problem? Is it a money problem? Can you talk about that?
So there's a number of things. Short answer is we haven't gotten there yet. So I get cases after they are ready to prosecute, come forward. I have not received any blighted houses. The people that have come before me are folks who were there, we cite them, probably because of a service issue. But in my previous experience, we have taken over drug-infested places. The issue is always money. You have to be able to pay off the mortgage. Because this is kind of new, I think that we'll probably be working with Ms. Walker as well and seeing how between the 2 law departments that best works as far as forfeiting property and all the other parts that go with it. It takes time. If you're going to forfeit a property because of code, nuisance, or crime, you have to show a pattern, right? You have to have proof. So money, and we're still probably too new in our process to address those.
Okay, and then for Ms. Reed, so I think we saw like a 60% home ownership rate, right? So for those 40% of homes that are not owned, is there a person right now whose job it is to find the owner or to find the bank or to find the landlord? Is there a person that does that? How long does that take per house? And could we not use these 4 vacant positions, at least 1 or 2 of them, to hire researchers if we do not have? Is that a need?
So there currently isn't someone who just, I'm sorry, excuse me. There currently isn't someone who just does just that. Each code enforcement officer is responsible for identifying that person at the time. So yes, if there is an opportunity for a new position to be held for that needs to be done as well.
Is that taking a long time? I get why are there houses like the one on that street that are not?
So there are some delays in identifying the proper property owner. Sometimes the property has been vacant for so many years that we do not necessarily have the resources into finding some of the individuals. We are looking into additional resources right now where we're tapping into some of Fulton County records with the Superior Courts to try to identify some of those properties. But again, we have issues, and I'm sure the Courts Department can help kind of explain that, because when it's going before court, sometimes we're having issues with identifying who in fact are the current property owners. Because if you sell a home this month, the record is going to change over time, but we haven't had that opportunity to see who that current record owner is until the next 6 months or so. So we're finding a delay at times.
So, and then Ms. Walker, I'm going to close out this. When you do, who's doing that research now? If there's no one in code that's doing it now, are you doing it? How is that getting done?
So Councilman Khalid, so I'll give a little bit of explanation. So there's a distinction. So you have actions that go against the person, and those are handled by the solicitor's office. Those are where we're asking the person to be fined, incarcerated, etc. And then those are the quasi-criminal actions. You have separate actions that are against the property and not a human. And those have to be compliant with a very, very specialized and detailed state statute that we have codified for the most part in your South Fulton code. So now you have a lot of that T from that state statute in your code. Now, you adopted that state statute through your code about 3 months ago. We put that in place. And since I have sat down with code enforcement, the police chief, we've had several meetings about prioritizing which properties are the most problematic and the most difficult. And I won't say the names of the properties, but we do have 2 apartment complexes and 1 gas station that we are currently going after. And we have 2 that are scheduled for court on December 5th. Because there is such a comprehensive state statute that you have to follow, you have to schedule the hearings between a certain amount of days, you have to get a certified title report, you have to make sure every owner, every occupant is notified, etc. Legal needs to be closely tied to that process, so we have been working with code enforcement, and then it's going to come to a point where the code enforcement will start getting orders to do XYZ on those properties, and then it's the council's discretion at that point as to how much will be budgeted to actually board the places up, potentially demolish them, or do remedial action like cutting the grass occasionally, etc. And the good part about this process on the property is that a lot of times you have these dilapidated properties, and it's not really negligent homeowners, it's mom and dad are now dead and the kids don't have the money to upkeep the property, and it's just causing the value of the surrounding homes to go down. You have people who are mentally incapacitated or just don't have the financial means to keep up the property. So the good part about this process is that once we take these actions, the state code allows us to put a lien on the property for the cost of going after these properties. And then what the city can do at that point is foreclose on that lien. And then it does 2 things that are really beneficial. It lets the city recoup and recover its money. And then it also lets the property go into transfer into hands of people who would invest and bring the property back to good economic use. Because no one's going to go to a foreclosure sale and purchase this property. They know the spotlight's on the property or it wouldn't be in a foreclosure sale. So most of the time, you have these companies come in. I don't know if you've heard of Investor Services, NRD LLC, and basically what they do is they wait for cities to engage in this process because you can get a property that would otherwise be $150,000 for this very, very low market cost. And then at that point, what these companies do is they rehab the property. Sometimes they'll demolish and rebuild, and it helps economic growth all around. So that's the process that we're engaged in. And then will.
I'm sorry, let me just ask you the supervision and the execution of that process. It sounds like you're doing a lot of this legal legwork, or the firm is doing a lot of this legal legwork. Is that included in our monthly cost, or is it going to be billed hourly for that separately, or like how does that work?
No, we are including that in the monthly costs. So we currently are including that for these properties, but we can discuss with the council, because what's going to happen is we're including it in the monthly cost, but then you get the money back on the back end. So it's just up to the council. Like, we can include that, get the money back on the back end, or we can just bill it outside separately, but at this point, I'm billing it within the monthly cost.
Okay, so that, yeah, I don't have a dog in the fight about who runs code enforcement. I just want to make sure that we're doing the enforcement part, that we're following up with that.
And some properties are easier than others, Councilman. You know, when one of the properties we executed a narcotics warrant, and in researching the title of the house, we found out the house was almost paid off, and it was in the name of the drug dealer. So I told my people to go after the house. And so some are simply that easy, and some are a little more problematic. If you have someone there renting the property, then you have to identify the owner, make the owner aware of the illegal activity that's taking place in their property, and you have to send letters of cease and desist.
Okay. Mrs. Gomes, and then the folks to the right.
So, what I've heard a couple of you all mention is that we're not quite there yet. I do believe that code enforcement should possibly go under police. Not saying necessarily right now is the perfect timing. You're a new chief.
Right.
You're setting up your police department and getting things on the up and up. And you're about to take on another department. You're still recruiting, you're still trying to deal with whatever crimes or things that we have happening in the community. And you feel that this bringing on code enforcement right now is probably the best thing for our police department.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a conversation that can be had. We certainly are having a lot of things that we're having to put together with respects to the police department. When I talked with Ms. Reed about the state of code enforcement in the city, and when I look at, I'm a detective by nature, so I sit down and I look at facts. And the fact is, right now, I heard the Economic Development Director talking about, earlier, we have the most undeveloped land in the Atlanta metropolitan area. Well, you know, that begs the question whether or not Ms. Reed should be spending a majority of her time with the planning aspects of the city and allowing us to go ahead and roll out some of our crime-fighting strategies, which would, quite frankly, include code enforcement. It might be as simple as just ripping the Band-Aid off. And so that's a conversation that I think that we should be having as we move forward. Certainly we have a lot, but that's no different in planning and economic development. I've worked with the Economic Development Director and the planning people in every city that I've gone to, because I understand the correlation between crime fighting and economic development. And so we need to just make sure that we have a responsible plan for growth in place. And certainly there's no ideal scenario when you're putting together a city of this magnitude and size. So we just need to just try to rip the Band-Aid off and try to grow as responsibly as we can.
One question that I have is, I know the attorney, you just spoke to the legal process. Would that be expedited under the police department at this point in time? Or is it just pretty much the same as the status quo as if it would be under, you know, code enforcement at this time?
The process would probably likely be the same as far as the speed.
Okay. And I do understand that code enforcement has received some resources. I understand they have some new computers and tracking devices and things of that nature. Is Ms. Reed?
I am.
I just want to try to understand exactly what is the timing piece of right now versus, because like I said, I believe code enforcement should go under the police, but I do believe that we still have some footing that we need to get done as far as our police department. So maybe right now is not the best time. I don't know if you have any input to share in regards to that and what's happening with the team or.
Gotcha. So I would like to say, regardless on where it goes, I support wherever code enforcement goes. It's definitely something that I can truly say is at the top of my list when it comes to what the community looks like and what the future of it looks like. When it comes down to the software, we have invested a number of dollars into the actual software that's necessary so they can do more field work. So that's something that we did for fiscal year 19. We purchased new software so they can do more reports out in the field, so they won't be in the office as much, but they're spending most of their time out. There is, as you mentioned, a tracking device on there, and that's for safety purposes. For example, if they're on a vacant structure or somewhere where they may be out doing photos and taking care of some things, there is an opportunity for, if something was to happen to them, they'll be able to have an identifier on them, because it's a requirement that that item is necessarily attached to them as like gear. In addition to that, they're on the same radios as PD now.
Okay.
So regardless on if there's any concerns, they have the same access to immediate response and safety as PD has. So regardless if they leave the community or come back into the community, they are to report to the 911 system, letting them know where they are. So they have that type of safety already currently in place.
So there is collaboration between you guys?
Of course. Yes, we work very well together.
I think, let me get to, somebody want to be here? Oh, and I did have one other question. For the, I know in the municipal court report, quarterly report, there were some mentions of 30 citations that code enforcement has issued. Is there a reason why that number is particularly low, or I guess probably low to me, but is that a low number? Because it was, I believe 30 citations were written for code enforcement, and that seemed kind of low.
I can't speak to, once I get them, that's when my position starts. So I can't speak to just general code citations, maintenance of property, trash dumping, things of that sort.
So one of the things that we try to push very heavily on is compliance, for example. Once we know that there are some issues had with the property, we do try to work with the property owner to bring them into compliance. So you may see a low number because we've actually worked with the property owner to see where there has been some changes made to the property. So it's not as if that we're not doing the inspections or following through. Most of that is for the sake of ensuring that the property owner has an opportunity to comply with current codes.
Okay. And I'll yield to Councilwoman Willis.
Okay. So I don't want to make this decision for you. As a policymaker, I'm a policymaker. I want the decision to come from staff. So whether it has to be from the city manager, whether it has to come from the chief, do you all think it's best for code enforcement to be moved now or later? Now, if I go by what the employees are saying, the employees want to go now. If I go by what the CFO is saying, the CFO is recommending now. If I go by what Chief Meadows is saying, it doesn't matter to him. And so for me to say it's not ready to go now, I think I'm out of line. That decision needs to come from staff.
All right, Ms. Rob.
But can Mr. City Manager weigh in on my question?
Well, I tell you, didn't weigh in with them before.
What did you say, Mr. Manager?
So I tell you, I think administratively, the budget and how we lined it up tell you what we think code enforcement should be for FY19, and that's under community development and where is that. I'll tell you that if the council decides to go in another way, then we're going to operate administratively there. But I would warn the council to be extremely careful on simply making decisions based on listening to staff members. I think staff members are very thoughtful. I think they have plenty of insights, but you hire the city manager to look at things executive-wide, and there are a bunch of different impacts that have to be made. And so when you make arbitrary decisions on moving folks, as well as the timing, there are financial implications, there are service delivery implications. There are also, operationally, do you usurp the authority of the folks that you put in place to make these decisions? And so those challenges are some that I would not think that you would want to take very lightly. Now again, if the council in your wisdom decides to move it, whether it be now or later, then we're going to adjust administratively. But I would tell you to look very closely at how you make this decision and others, because as you open up this Pandora box, it doesn't stop there.
You said a mouthful. I wrote some notes, so I won't reiterate some things I would have said. One, I don't know if we've had sufficient time to assess the model, particularly since there's already collaboration between the two departments and code enforcement is already on radios. As it relates to those 4 vacant positions, I'm going to tell you, my area doesn't have a code enforcement person. I have multiple people working my area, and that's been a challenge. And so while some communities have had the benefit of having somebody assigned full-time, mine is sporadic, and I get reports from, different inspectors coming in when it's a problem or I get a complaint, and I get a lot of them. And then I farm them to the department, but I certainly would like one dedicated to the area. Secondly, I was curious, and I think it's important, or at least I would like to see what our process is. I'm going to give Mr. Pasco credit for this at our last presentation, but I do love Vizio. I think I mentioned that. And so the process flow, because there are a lot of different players in making sure this process is a clean process. And I think we need to hammer that down before we make any kind of wholesale changes, as well as I'd like an update in the future on the vacant property registration. We passed that legislation to find out what that is in council. We also have to be mindful, we got to put our money where our mouth is. If we want these properties demolished, we have to put some money in budget. And so I don't want us thinking it's an issue with the staff when it's a resource issue, and we haven't armed out all our processes. We are a new city, and I think we need to take the time to flesh these details out. And then one last thing, I also wanted to look at the increased liability insurance costs if this did go under the police department.
Lastly, Mr. Manager, you talked about a lot. I agree with what you said. Well, I want to add one thing to that, just liability. When you tell me you don't have a code enforcement man with a gun, I already got 125 people with guns and 125 liabilities out there. So those types of things we have to really look into. And that's what we need to do with this. I think that the government, federal government, has always been in line for cutting community development block grant money. And that has been the method by which, in the county, in which we were able to tear down dilapidated homes with that kind of fund, the block grant fund. So I want to get someone to look in and see where we are today in terms of community development block grant fund. All right? Thank you.
Mayor, can I clarify? Just to piggyback on what you just said, for several of the cities that we represent, instead of arming the code enforcement, if they feel unsafe, what we do is tell them, please go get a police officer to escort you to the property. So that's a possible solution.
And give them a police radio.
Correct.
No problem.
Absolutely. And then
I understand that. But you've been a police officer for 20 years, and you get post certified as a code enforcement tomorrow. There's a little bit of training and a little bit of experience in that you don't have. Okay. And then
to clarify, I don't want the council to think that the cost of the abatement is, there are no costs, so I'd like to clarify. So as far as we've had multiple meetings with staff, we've met with, we've convened on what we're going to do, we've strategized, all of that has been within the billing, but there are costs that I have been billing under legal that have not been against code enforcement that relate to the litigation, and particularly every time we go against one of these properties, I have to pull a certified title report and I have to hire a title examiner. So what I've been doing is I've been paying for that cost up front and then just invoicing it under the legal budget versus under the code enforcement budget. And then when we file these, I also have to file multiple documents with the Superior Court. There's costs for that. I've been doing the same thing. So the litigation component has been slightly different from the administrative component. So if you would like to rearrange the setup that I've been doing, then I would just need direction on that from you.
Colleagues, we have to move on. We have an executive session after our regular session. I would like to entertain a motion to close the work session. I'll make a motion to close the work session. Second. Proper move to second discussion. All those in favor?